Hello and welcome. This session has been recorded and we'll be sharing the recording by email with everyone registered. So before we start, just to be aware that there's a chat box on the bottom and also a reaction button that you can use. And as all of our presentations here at RRU, we like to begin by acknowledging that we are located on the traditional lands of the Concepcion and Lekwungen families, and it has been a long tradition of teaching and learning on these lands. I'm Francisco Levi, I'm an education specialist here at RRU, and I'm so excited to introduce our speaker, Kellie Garrett. She's a corporate director for different organizations and a governance consultant, executive coach, who also speaks and consults on all leadership topics. She is a communications expert, named Master Communicator and Fellow by the International Associations of Business Communication. She also was named as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women and top 25 women of influence. With us today, Kellie Garrett. Thank you, Kellie, for being here.
So just a little bit more about me. My employees about 20 years ago stuck my head on this picture of a warrior maiden in a suit. So I never aspired to be a boss, and I kept getting promoted because my bosses were either promoted or fired or got pregnant or left the organization. So I found myself as in the position of VP when I was about 38, which was before I was ready. And I thought of myself as the warm and friendly person that I had always been when I wasn't a boss. And so I really discounted my positional power. Also had no sense of personal power in terms of presence and so on. And so the organization I was working for kept instituting these 360-degree feedback surveys. And like everyone who gets a 360, the first thing you look at is everything that was critical. You just instantly discount what was positive and go straight to what was critical, and then also try and figure out who said it. But the thing that really stuck in my craw was the feedback that I was intimidating and powerful and even dominating in meetings. And I didn't see that in myself at all. And I remember crying, talking to an executive coach, saying, I just don't see it. I want to cut it out of me. And my executive coach just laughed at me and said, well, good luck with that. It's part of your DNA. And I just kind of looked at him and thought, oh my God, I think he's right. And he said, you can't manage what you don't acknowledge. And, you know, that is such a true statement. If you don't acknowledge that you're having the impact that you are, you don't have to agree with it. It doesn't have to match your intention. But until you acknowledge it, you can't possibly manage it. So he said, you need to think of yourself as a Ferrari. So, of course, I really like that analogy. And he said, a Ferrari is still a Ferrari when the engine is turned off. You notice it for sure, but it's not, the ignition isn't on, so it's not roaring. It needs to kind of sort of go to the speed limit in your town or city, and you can let her rip on the Autobahn. So he said, in your case, you can let your big presence out when you're on stage, because I used to do a lot of speaking for my organization. But if you're in a meeting and you really want other people to contribute, you need to be mindful of your positional and personal power. You can't speak first, you can't speak too often, and so on. So you need to sort of think of it like the throttle. And I just found that so helpful. He also assisted me with navigating politics, in addition to understanding my own power, my relationship with others who held power, and how to navigate politics in a way that didn't discount that they existed, and learn to play it in a way that was ethical. So a few definitions. Politics is about navigating within the political arena, and it requires knowing the unwritten rules, the real way decisions are reached, what all the networks are, and handling sabotage and deception if it happens. Power is knowing who holds formal and informal power, how to speak truth to power in a way that saves face. Often when we're very uncomfortable speaking truth to power, we can be more blunt than we intend to, and even accusatory. We need to, like it or not, within organizations, respect ego and turf. And finally, on the influence front, influence is nothing more or less than the ability to personally affect the actions, decisions, opinions, or thinking of others. And it allows you to get things done and achieve desired outcomes, because as knowledge workers, we get work done with and through others, regardless of our position in the organization. So the foundation for these concepts, if you want to be a human who behaves well instead of badly, is integrity. So what's in it for you to master these concepts? Well, frankly, competence isn't enough. Many people I coach say, well, I want my results to speak for myself, or my expertise to speak for itself, my track record, and that's fine, but you also need political savvy, power, and the ability to influence if you want to further your career. So let's unpack these concepts. People with political savvy competencies, and the word positive is deliberate here, meaning use a navigation of the politics in a positive and ethical manner, tend to have better career prospects, tend to be seen as more promotable, and are less likely to derail in their careers, regardless of what point on the ladder they're on. So avoiding office politics is not only not great, it actually can be deadly, because every workplace has a system of power, and it's important to understand what the unwritten rules of the game are. It's not going to be in your employee handbook. In fact, it may even be opposite to what's in your employee handbook. So you need to know who the people who hold the power and influence are, so that you can navigate it, and again, navigate it ethically. So can politics and power and influence be altruistic? Well, the answer is it depends on intent. So if your use of politics and power and your efforts at influence are oriented towards self-gain, then it's manipulative and it's not altruistic. If it is oriented towards furthering the goals of the team or the organization, then it can be altruistic. Now, one thing that's interesting to note is that these concepts exist everywhere, not just in the workplace. They exist in every family and every community. I mean, even a group of friends, you're going to have probably one or two who exert more influence and have more power with respect to where you go for dinner even. So it's just how humans roll. So if you're one of the kinds of people who were like me, I thought politics were just bad and unsavory, and I thought they could only be used for self-gain. So this is a reframing opportunity that they actually can be good. It can help you build connections, access opportunities, get things done, and avoid political blunders. So I'm going to start a poll here. So what I'd like you to do is get your phone out and type 37607 as the addressee. So as if you're texting Joe, instead of typing Joe, you're typing 37607 as the addressee. And then you're sending this text message, Kellie Garrett 014. You'll get a link instantly. Ignore the link and don't click on it. Francisco, if you could put these instructions in the chat, that would be great for anyone who's joining a little bit later. Okay, so I am now going to launch the poll. So you're going to answer A, B, C, or D, and then hit send. So like most audiences, the majority have experienced politics as negative. So we have 25 responses. I'll just give it another short while. If you've just joined, you're texting the address C on your phone 37607, sorry, 07, and then you're texting Kellie Garrett 014. And don't click on the link. Okay, well, we have 31 responses. You can see we've got 65 who are, oh, it just changed, 62%. Are saying that it's negative, and then you can see the rest there. Okay. Now text undo. Now you can write what words come to mind. So put a thought in your text and then hit send. And if you have another thought, write that and hit send again. Ugh. Messy. Exhausting. More than one person put exhausting. Backstabbing. Male dominated, interesting. Inefficient, unsavory, that's what I thought. Bitchy, right beside male dominated. So you can see the majority of people, when we think about politics, we're not thinking really positive things. Machiavellian is one of the words folks chose. Okay, great. So
excuse me, Kellie, are we able to see the results on the screen? Because some people are asking about it.
Oh, you should be able to see them, can you not?
No, we're not.
That is strange. Okay. Okay, well, I'll just have to read it to you then. This is the first time this has happened. Sorry about that. So the predominant words are exhausting, toxic, unfair, messy, damaging, and power. Okay. Now text undo. So what is political savvy? It's about recognizing, first of all, that politics exist and recognizing the politics that exist at your own organization. It's about understanding the culture. Is it a hierarchical culture? It's a no-no to jump a couple of levels to go directly to someone above you, or is it a relatively relaxed culture, non-hierarchical, where it's okay? It's knowing the relationship networks, who's connected to whom, and navigating the politics ethically or not. So to reiterate what I said a few minutes ago, choosing not to play politics is not smart, and it is in and of itself a political move, because politics drive how work gets done. So a political blind spot is moral versus rational blocks. So the moral block is that the belief that politics are morally wrong, which carries the implication that organizational politics are manipulation, and it creates an ethical barrier then. And then you become like Kellie and you think, well, I don't play politics because they're unsavory. So if you believe manipulation is the same thing as politics, you're going to have a moral block that will prevent you from being politically savvy. The rational block is the notion that my work should speak for itself, and I don't need to worry about networks and influence and things like that. So you can think of politics in an organization and how one plays them as ranging from under political, likened to a lamb, to over political, like a crafty fox. Where you want to be is somewhere in the middle, like an owl. So you're savvy, you're ethical, but you're not blind to the fact that politics exist. If you're under political, you may be underestimated. You may have an insufficient network. You might even have some blind spots about image. You may lack verbal discipline in terms of you think you can just say what you think to anyone, and you don't really have regard for ego and turf and so on. You're also likely not to promote yourself judiciously. If you're overly political, on the other hand, you may have hidden agendas, try to curry favor all the time, self-interested, may even play psychological games and jockey for position. So now back to the poll, and choose A, B, C, or D. Now, Francisco, can they see the results now?
I'm not seeing any results now.
Okay. I am mystified. So I will read the results to you. 47% said I'm politically savvy. 39% said I'm under political, and only 3 confessed to being crafty like a fox. And another 13% said I am not sure. So that's great that such a high number are political savvy. And for those of you who need to grow it, hopefully there are some ideas here. So now text undo again. So networks influence virtually everything that occurs in organizations and frankly, everywhere else. So networks are relationships formed across organizations that are formed voluntarily. So it spans socializing, processing, collaboration, knowledge sharing. It might even be my kid babysits a VP's kid. And so therefore I've gotten to know the VP because when I drop my kid off, I've talked to him or her socially, for example. Human beings tend to reach out to people they know fairly well when they need something. So if you're working on a project and you reach out to your network, if you have a fairly large network, you're going to be able to tap into the brains and knowledge and networks of all the others in your own network. And the top 20% of performers in organizations tend to have the biggest networks. So there's a really great assessment that's about $50 US. I've given you the link here in this presentation later on. That generates a political savvy report. So if you're one of the 39% who just voted and said you're a bit lamb-like and you're under political, this could be something that would be useful for you. So the political savvy pyramid separates the different aspects of politics into character, awareness, proactivity, and protection strategies. So character is the foundation. Personal integrity, obviously, which is what I'm espousing with this presentation, is about demonstrating high standards for integrity and ethics, being interested in earning others' trust, caring about others and not just yourself, which speaks louder than words. We all have this sense of who's in it for them versus the good of the group. Performance integrity is the actual work you do. So you deliver quality, you deliver on time, you deliver results, and you can be counted on. Awareness strategies, when it comes to political savvy, are rooted in, not surprisingly, savvy attitudes, which means that you understand that politics exist. You don't fight against them. You recognize they just are. They're neutral in and of themselves. You recognize that decisions are often based on relationship connections and so on. And you understand that letting your results speak for themselves actually might mean not getting credit for your contributions. You recognize that some people are driven by personal agendas. They're more the fox end of the savvy spectrum. And remain relatively unfazed by the fact that power and politics exist, regardless of how they're played. Studies politics means you're aware of the networks, the informal networks, who has power, who has access to power, and what the unwritten rules for success are. Finally, knowing the corporate buzz is about understanding how you're perceived and your team is perceived, regardless of fairness or accuracy, because perception is reality. and to work at aligning perceptions with what you perceive to be reality and matching your intended impact with your actual impact. The third element is proactive strategies. So more on managing perceptions, building wider networks. Like, it's always fascinated me how people will work at an organization for quite some time and they'll go for coffee with the same people every single day. Well, that's not going to build your network. Of course, you want to go for coffee with your friends now and then, but you should also be expanding your network to create allies at other parts of the organization. If there's an opportunity to sit on a committee, for example, that might give you access to people in cross-functional areas, that's another way to look at it. Enhances one's power image. So when we are in a meeting and we preface an opinion by saying, well, I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks this, but, or things like that, it is a cue to others to discount what we're about to say, which diminishes our power. Savvy communication would mean being honest and sharing what it is you think, but in a way that saves face for others. So you don't want to be false, but you don't need to say, I completely disagree, which is one of the things I used to say before I got better at this. You can say, oh, that's an interesting perspective. Let me weigh in with mine. And then ethical lobbying. So maybe you need to socialize an idea before you take it to present at the senior management team table, for example. Finally, and many of you associated politics with negative concepts, there are foxes out there. So understanding that sabotage and deception does occur, and you need to be as trusting as possible, but to also be wary when you hear you are being badmouthed and so on. Try to respond non-defensively, try to build the relationship one-on-one and understand what is behind it. And then if you cannot repair the relationship, still interact with them in a savvy manner. When we write people off, even if we perceive them to be deceptive, we're not going to actually further our cause, because how we treat someone else, even if they've done us wrong, feeds into others' perceptions of us. So this political savvy assessment is called organizational savvy. And as I said, you can purchase it on this website and you'll get a copy of this. So let's move to power. So sources of power are either formal or informal. Formal is easy to spot. It's the org chart. It's positional power. You have the ability to hire, to fire, to manage performance, and even be punitive if warranted. Informal sources of power, some are easy to see and some are harder to see. So relationship power is founded on having wide networks. Charisma allows you to influence people with the force of your personality. You may have a particular kind of expertise that gives you power. Referent power is where you work with or beside someone who's very powerful and you have their ear, and so therefore you have power by referral. Unity power, for example, is when large numbers of people believe in something and get together and can even change laws. So now let's vote on this. I think of myself as a powerful person, or I don't think of myself as powerful. Again, I gather you can't see it, Francisco?
No, I can't.
Darn. Okay, well, I'll just have to tell you what's going on then. Hang on. Okay, so 3/4 of you said I feel powerful in certain contexts. 16% said I think of myself as a powerful person, and 8% said I don't think of myself as powerful. No one said I rarely, if ever, feel powerful. Okay. Now text undo. So our sense of power is a continuum, much like the political savvy concept. So our belief in our ability to impact or influence is an aspect of power, a sense of self-efficacy, which means that even if I don't know how to do this thing that's in front of me, I believe that I have the ability to figure things out. And it's confidence in our opinions, which is not the same as being wedded to our opinions. So now another poll here. I'm comfortable around powerful people. Okay, so almost half of you said yes, 30% said most of the time, and the rest of you said sometimes. So text undo. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment and try one other setting to see if you can see the poll results, which is the whole point of this. So that's still not doing it. Okay, well,
Also
I guess I'll
not.
just give up on that. Oops. Don't text undo if you haven't voted yet. I'm willing to challenge powerful people. 2/3 say depends on the person, and 1/3 say sometimes, and about 13% say always. Now text undo. So when thinking about power, one of the things to think about, and this concept is intertwined with political savvy, is to recognize that every organization has a core group. And the core group is people who have a lot of power and influence, often behind the scenes. So some in the core group are inevitably going to be on your senior management team or executive committee, but some are lower down in the organization. They're generally the people who are the go-to ones, tapped on the shoulder to sit on committees, to get their opinion. They likely have more power than the position they occupy would indicate. Their network would be such that they might be able to socialize an idea and bypass regular decision making. If they're senior enough, they may be able to stop things just because it displeases them. Another thing to ponder is an informal power chart. So there's always positional power, but the things that are less obvious, when you look at this chart, obviously the coalition on the left with the dotted green line is in place because they are all part of the same silo. So they report up through to the top dog. Makes sense, they're in a coalition. But coalitions can also be independent of the org chart, and key influencers may not be at the top of the org chart. As you see at the bottom level here, there's 2 influencers there who might be part of the core group. So it's interesting to ponder, how is your team positioned? Or if you're an external coach or consultant, how is your client's team positioned? So finally, let's talk about influence. So influence is definitely connected to politics, because part of navigating politics is being able to influence. And influence is connected to power. It can be positive, instilling confidence and trust, or it can be negative, fearful and fostering competition. So influence is nothing more or less than the ability to affect others, either their actions, decisions, opinions, or thinking. And it is a big part of leadership. So now another poll. I am effective at influencing. Okay, so about 60% are saying usually. A quarter of you are saying yes, and the rest of you are saying sometimes. So influencing starts really early. Francisco knows this. He has a baby. The baby is 2 weeks old and has already learned that if I cry, someone will show up and do something that's pleasant. Apparently, we can influence 100 or more people a day, which I've never tried to count this, and I feel a little suspicious about, but some researcher said it, so it must be true. So what's ethical use of influence? Well, it means being honest and having integrity, and also being a detective to a degree. So the Center for Creative Leadership put together 4 keys to influencing others. The first is organizational intelligence, which is AKA political savvy. The second is team promotion, which is judiciously promoting both your team and yourself to create visibility for what you're doing. In other words, not letting your work speak for itself. The third is trust building, which we'll get into shortly. And finally, leveraging networks. So as you can see, all of these concepts are intertwined. There are 4 major key influencing tactics or categories. One is rational persuasion, where you're using data, logic, facts to influence people who like that sort of thing. Inspirational appeal is connecting to feelings, a sense of belonging, appealing to values or common purpose. It's the type that works best for me. Consultation and collaboration is, just as those words infer, consultation, seeking advice. The magic of asking somebody else, what do you think? And asking for input into something that you're trying to influence is powerful. And then collaboration obviously is working with somebody else to bring something about. There's a really great assessment called the Influence Style Indicator Assessment. They have come up with 5 categories of influence, which are related to what I just shared. Everything from asserting, where you're advocating by debate and maybe even getting aggressive, depending on what's going on, rationalizing, negotiating, bridging, and inspiring. So what does that look like in practice? Well, asserting sounds like these kinds of statements. I'm 100% certain that their policy requires that, etc. Rationalizing would be experts say this, our analysis shows this. Negotiating sounds just as the word infers. If you will do X, then I can do Y. I'll support you in the meeting tomorrow. And when my project's presented, then you would be asking for theirs. Inspiring is, imagine the impact we could have. Just think of what this could mean to the future. And you can see the other ones. Bridging is, I had this same issue last year. Let me tell you how. Sounds like you're saying you can't go any further to accommodate us. Will you explain? We have a common agenda. If we stick together, then blah, blah, blah. So another element to ponder when it comes to influence is, what is your sphere of influence? So you can control your own behaviors, your own actions, savvy attitudes towards politics, ethical use of influence. You can control your results. You can influence colleagues and other parts of the company and so on. But you can't influence people you don't know, senior decisions, or external events. The most important influence factor is you, because the medium is the message, as Marshall McLuhan said. So when we're trying to influence someone, another individual or group, how we're perceived is actually going to precede how well of how you're perceived, your track record, how others regard you. Those in power, are you perceived as influential and having a good network, all that kind of stuff that maybe shouldn't matter, but does. So when you share whatever it is you're trying to influence someone about, it goes through this filter. And if you are perceived as worth listening to, ears will be wider open than if you're not perceived that way. There are 10 principles of influence that go more granularly into how you can influence. The most popular one is attraction. People are more easily influenced by someone they perceive to be like them. And there's a bunch of other ones here, and I'll give you the detail in the appendix. But the linchpin, if you want to be a human who behaves well and who is trustworthy, and you don't want to be like those annoying humans who behave badly in your workplace, is trust. So another poll. I am a trustworthy person. Like every other talk I give or workshop I deliver, the vast majority say, yes, I'm trustworthy. So right now, how many responses have I got? I have 25 responses so far. 83% are saying, yes, I'm trustworthy, and 17% most of the time. No one is voting for some of the time or no. Now text undo. And the next poll is thinking of everyone you've ever dealt with in the workplace. Is everyone trustworthy? Most people, about half or less than half. Okay, so you guys are a little more cynical than most audiences I deal with. 61% are saying most people are trustworthy, 25% half are trustworthy, and 14% are saying less than half. The point here is that no matter what audience I deal with, there's a marked difference between how we rate our own trustworthiness versus how we rate the trustworthiness of others. So if someone breaks your trust, what do you do? And you can answer more than one selection, just text your selection one at a time. So if you usually write them off, text A and send. And then if you also avoid them, text C and send. So although you're more cynical than a lot of my audiences, a whopping 42% go and talk to them to figure out what happened. That is much higher than I usually get. So yay for you guys. And hardly any of you write them off at 3%. Usually that's a much higher percentage. A small number of you are confessing to talking negatively about them behind their back. That's what I used to do. 15% of you are avoiding them. 16% are open to rebuilding trust, but they have to make the first move. And then 19% of you say you're curious about your part to play. So trust is the linchpin. It's the conduit for influence. And frankly, it is the key to navigating politics and power ethically. If people don't trust you, you're kind of hooped in terms of being able to influence others. Google found in their Aristotle study that the top characteristics of their highest performing teams was vulnerability and trust enabled by psychological safety. So psychological safety is things like feeling the courage to say, I don't know, or I'm accountable, I screwed up and I'm accountable, or to stick your neck out and say, I need help. Any of those things require psychological safety because they are vulnerable things to do. And you need to trust the people you are saying those things to, that you're not going to get your head cut off. So most of us misread others' perceptions of our trustworthiness. And one of the reasons for this is when we think of trust, we are outer focused. We are not inner focused. We know that we are trustworthy, as witnessed by that poll. I said, how are you trustworthy? Well, most of you said, yes, I'm trustworthy, or you said most of the time I am. So we're judging ourselves by our intentions. We're judging others by their impact. We actually don't really care what their intentions were. What we care about is the impact that they had on us or our colleagues or our team. But trust in business is complicated. We've all, by the time we're 30 or 35, had our first soul-destroying boss. We've probably had some colleagues who were foxy and in terms of their use of politics. And so we may end up adopting this idea that I'm never going to trust you again, or you're dead to me because you broke my trust. So I was one of those people who, if you broke my trust, you really were dead to me. I would act like you were alive when I was in a meeting with you, but you were really dead to me. And I remember sitting in a meeting when I was around, I don't know, my early 40s and realizing about a third of the people in the meeting were dead to me. And I thought, well, this is not healthy because I'm a VP And I'm supposed to be a guardian of the culture, which we're trying to make as positive as possible. And here I am writing people off. So that is not healthy. And so I set about trying to repair those relationships and was able to do so with most of them, but not all. Sometimes we write people off because our values get in the way. So I value integrity. I perceive you as lacking integrity. I perceive you as a fox. And so I write you off and I decide I don't trust you. I value honesty. I find out you weren't honest. I write you off basis that. Maybe I value kindness. I find you unkind. We wouldn't want to be written off for one thing we did, yet we often have no compunction about writing someone else for one thing they did. But trust versus distrust is primal. It's rooted in our caveman days. When we trust someone, we feel safe. The emotions we experience range from curiosity to generosity to caring. We are more likely to cooperate, listen, debate ideas. And the neurophysiology that we're experiencing is that we are flooded with oxytocin, which is the feel-good warmth hormone, connection hormone in humans. Distrust, on the other hand, is primal. It's this person poses a threat. It's dangerous. I'm not safe. I might feel fear or anger or resentment. And I'm oriented towards defending, resisting, blaming, complaining, and judging. And my amygdala is primed with the fight or flight chemicals of adrenaline, and cortisol is flooding my system as well, which is the stress hormone. So it is really important to become proficient at recognizing what causes the loss of trust in ourselves, and to make the decision, because it is a decision to trust and rebuild trust, that when things have gone awry, that we're going to be oriented towards rebuilding trust. And writing people off isn't politically savvy. It's not just not politically savvy vis-a-vis the person in front of you who you no longer trust. Other people notice who we have written off and then in turn judge us. So there's a groovy model here by Raina and Raina called 7 Steps for Dealing with Betrayal. And it's rooted in our capacity for trust. And each of us has a different capacity for trust. Some of us have experienced more difficult things in life all the way back from childhood. Some of us have a more optimistic frame of mind and personality. Whatever the case is for you, look at how you can build your capacity for trust, because it'll expand your ability to have wider networks and not write people off. So another poll: what builds trust with me? You can text a couple of words at a time here if you have more than one concept. Vulnerability, connection, honesty, credibility, openness, acknowledgement, authenticity, sincerity, consistency. Yes, I can expect you to be similar week after week. Empathy, goodness, transparency, acknowledging mistakes. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, now text undo. What breaks my trust? If you have more than one thing, again, just text it one at a time. Lying. Someone said kindness. I think they didn't mean that. Dishonesty. Betrayal. Gossip, deceit, betrayal. Gossip is an interesting one, because you may be gossiping with someone else about somebody else, but I may be listening to you and thinking, do you talk about me when I'm not around? Some of the other things that break trust: back channeling, deceit, showboating, that's interesting, disrespect, backstabbing, and so on. Thank you. Okay, now turn it inward. Ways I may have broken trust. Someone saying provided feedback that didn't land well. Body language. Talking negatively about someone who isn't there. Took me a long time to get over that habit because I felt if someone had broken my trust, it gave me a get out of jail free card to talk negatively about them. So most of you are choosing talking negatively about someone who isn't there. So remember, that may be breaking trust with the person you're talking to, not the person you're talking about. The other two favorites are body language and providing feedback that didn't land well. So now think of one thing you might do to increase trust in your organization. Transparency. Conversations. Being vulnerable. Look at my part to play. Inclusion. Vulnerability is winning big time here. If you've read Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, there's some really practical ideas in that book. Thinking of the welfare of others, inclusion, integrity, respect, collaboration. Wonderful. You're wonderful people. Okay, now text leave so that you get out of my poll. And that's all I've got for you. Basically, I'm positing that politics, power, and influence are interconnected, and trust is the linchpin. So assess yourself, your boss, and others on your team. Where do they sit on these continuums? And remember that the foundation is integrity. I'll open it up to Q&A, but before I do, there are some wonderful books that the Center for Creative Leadership offers. They're actually booklets. They're about $15 US. They're 15 pages long. They've got practical exercises. There's one, there are other ones beyond these two, but these two are particularly good. I've also given you a link to figuring out an influence map and some other exercises. So with that, if you want to turn your camera on, if you want to do a Q&A, I'm happy to listen to your take on things or answer any questions you might have.
Let me know if this works.
That works.
Okay, perfect. I'm curious to hear, in terms of people being political as an owl versus becoming a fox.
Yeah.
How do you figure out if you're starting to get into that fox mode, right? Like, I think, what are ways that someone could self-assess that or figure out whether they're becoming too overly political and on that end?
I think one of the keys is to ask yourself what your intention is. So as I said at the beginning, is your intent altruistic, i.e. it's for the good of the team and the organization, or is it self-focused for your own gain? Now, it's a slippery slope when it comes to your own team, because that's where silo behavior also can emerge. So ideally, if it's for the good of the team, it's also for the good of the organization. So that's one way. Another way is with trusted colleagues to say, I recognize politics exist. I'm trying to play them ethically. Do you have any feedback for me?
There's one question here in the text.
Yes.
The chat box says, Isha's, how do you deal with a fox? How could one respond to that?
Well, I think if you've read Brene Brown's book, she talks about braving trust as an act of courage. And the G in braving is to extend the most generous interpretation to the words, actions, and thoughts of others. So we often ascribe negative intentions to people we deem to be foxes. But just because someone is a fox doesn't mean they are intending to do harm. They may just be overly political in terms of trying to curry favor and so on, and that they're annoying the rest of you. If you've actually experienced sabotage, that's a different affair. And the answer annoyingly is it depends. If it's somebody much more senior to you, you or a peer, you can enlist the help of your boss. In terms of, usually the more senior you become, the more politically savvy you become. So you can enlist their help in terms of how to deal with this person. If you are at 6s and 7s in terms of, okay, they seem to be a fox, but I'm not sure their intent is negative, you may wish to go and have a curiosity conversation. You know, when X thing happened, it didn't have a great impact on our team, but I'm sure you had good intentions. Can you tell me more? That could be a whole conversation over wine.
Great, Kelly. And we have 2 more questions that are related.
Yeah.
How are you political in a toxic environment, and how to work politics to positively affect a toxic environment?
How do you act political in a toxic environment? Well, the root is always integrity. So even if your environment is toxic, to retain your integrity, which is not the same as becoming super judgmental and having that moral block that I referenced early in the presentation. So it's to exercise your integrity, number 1. Number 2, don't write off politics just because a lot of the politics that you witness are negative. Politics are always neutral until the actions make them toxic or positive. So you can still build your network as widely as possible. There are likely some people you can find in the organization who have integrity, with whom you can build networks and navigate the politics. And if it's pervasively toxic, you may actually want to look at leaving, because unfortunately, emotions are contagious and behavior is contagious. So if the organization is toxic, you've deemed it to be pervasively toxic, you can still hold your integrity and try and build positive relationships, but it's going to be difficult to navigate. Isha says, align with their interests or connect with people who have influence over them, but assume positive intent. I think we can always assume positive intent. Even the foxes are probably feeling like they're trustworthy and doing things for positive reasons, even if you have evidence that it has not been positive. I like Bernadette's idea. Let's have wine and how to deal with foxes. So I'm mindful of the time. So thank you all for participating. You'll get a copy of this presentation afterwards. Francisco, before you send it, I'm just going to add a few more slides basis the questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll wait for them.
I just want to call out William's comment, which is right on. He says it takes the tone at the top to clear up the toxic cesspool. It's unfortunately, it's the tone at the top that allows the stink to build in the first place. You're right on both counts, William. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kelly, for your presentation. That was amazing. Thank you. Thank you for your participation.
Have a wonderful day. Go out and behave well. Take care.